She was only a servant, a ghost in the nursery, until the night the Alpha King heard her sing. One forbidden song woke the beast inside him, and the truth their kingdom tried to bury. Now every note she sings could save his soul, or end them both. But wait until you see what happens when the last verse is sung. The world above her laughed. Mira could hear it, the clink of crystal goblets, the rustle of silks, the wild howls echoing through the marble corridors of Moonspire Citadel. The Alpha King's mating ceremony was in full bloom, a celebration of dominance and destiny, where the most powerful wolves of the realm gathered beneath banners woven from moonlight itself. And yet, while gold and silver danced in the grand hall, Mira stood in the nursery, surrounded not by nobles, but by silence. The chamber was warm, washed in amber firelight from the hearth. Wooden cribs lined the walls, each carved with ancient sigils to protect the royal heirs from dark omens. The scent of milk and lavender filled the air, mingling with the faint, wild musk of wolf cubs. Mira moved softly between the cribs, her hands steady, her heart anything but. Two pups slept soundly, twins, the future of the royal line. Their tiny chests rose and fell in sync, each breath a reminder of the bloodline she served but could never belong to. She hummed to them, a melody so old it had no name. Her voice was soft, steady, threaded with the ache of memory. Sleep, little moonlight, sleep and be still. The stars guard your dreams. The wind bends to your will. Her mother had sung that to her once, long before the world shattered, before the Greybloods were condemned. Myra's fingers paused over the smallest twin's blanket. A mark glowed faintly on his tiny wrist. The crest of the Alpha bloodline, a crescent intertwined with a fong. She stared at it too long, until the warmth in her chest twisted into something hollow. Because her family once carried a mark too, one now erased from every record. Traitors, they'd called them. Cursed wolves who'd sung the wrong songs during the War of Veils. Her parents were executed. Her pack dissolved. Mira had been spared only because she was a child, placed under royal protection, which meant servitude. The sound of drums echoed faintly through the walls, steady and slow, the rhythm of the ceremony. The king would be choosing his Luna tonight. The thought made her throat tighten for reasons she didn't want to name. Not your world, she whispered to herself. Not your story. Still, when she glanced at the moon through the window, a pale coin hanging over the dark mountains, she felt it watching her. Listening. The door creaked. Mira froze, expecting the head maid or a guard. Instead, a shadow filled the doorway, tall, broad, and impossibly still. The firelight caught the edge of a wolfskin cloak, the glint of a golden clasp shaped like a crescent fong. Her breath caught. The Alpha King. Darius Vane of the Moonspire Pack, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Realm, the man whose name could silence a crowd and whose wrath could flatten a battalion. He stood framed in firelight, his gaze unreadable, his presence so vast it made the air hum. Mira dropped to her knees instinctively, her head bowed low. Your Majesty. For a long heartbeat, he said nothing. Only the crackle of the fire and the quiet breathing of the pups filled the room. Then, you were singing. The words were low, rough, not cruel, but dangerous in their stillness. Yes, sire, Mira whispered. A lullaby, to help them sleep. A pause. Then boots crossed the wooden floor. She could feel his approach before she dared to lift her gaze. That song, he said, quieter now. Where did you learn it? Her pulse stuttered. She kept her eyes on the floor. It's old, my lord. My mother used to sing it. The words, he pressed, his voice sharpening like a drawn blade. They're forbidden. Myra's breath caught. Forbidden. He stopped before her. When she finally dared to look up, his eyes met hers, molten amber, swirling with the faintest flicker of something she couldn't name. Recognition. Or warning. That melody, he said slowly, was sung by the Greybloods before the war. The word hit like a slap. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Darius's jaw clenched. The mark at his throat, the dormant alpha bond, pulsed faintly beneath his skin. He took one more step closer, the scent of pine and smoke enveloping her. "You shouldn't know that song," he murmured, his voice softer now, almost to himself. "I didn't mean," she began, but her words died as he reached out. He didn't touch her, not quite. His fingers hovered near her wrist, a breath apart. The air between them thickened. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that space, that almost touch. Then it happened. A pulse. Not sound, not sight. A rush of energy that rolled through the room like thunder muffled under the skin. The twin pups stirred in their sleep, whimpering softly. The fire flared, its flames licking higher for a moment. Darius's eyes widened. Mira stumbled back, pressing a hand to her chest. What was that?" she whispered. He looked shaken, the wolf in him rising like a shadow behind his gaze. "Your scent." His voice was low, rough. "It shouldn't do that." Mira blinked. "Do what?" He turned away, as if breaking the air between them before it could pull tighter. "Wake the beast." The room fell silent again. Only the twins' soft breaths filled the space. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its edge, replaced by something dangerous in its restraint. "Forget that song," he said. "Forget this night." Then he was gone, a blur of shadow and silver slipping through the doorway. Mira stood there long after the echo of his footsteps faded. The lullaby still hummed in her bones, her skin tingling where his nearness had burned the air. But no matter how she tried, she couldn't forget. Because somewhere deep within her, something had stirred too, something ancient and alive, whispering that her story was only just beginning. The sun had barely risen before the whispers began. Servants moved through the citadel with hushed voices and darting eyes. Trays clattered. Footsteps echoed against marble floors that felt colder than usual. Something had gone wrong at the ceremony, something unthinkable. No one said it aloud, not where guards could hear. But Mira heard fragments, half-sentences slipping through doorways as she passed with her morning duties. The king walked out before the vow. No Luna chosen. His eyes were strange. Mira kept her head down, hands busy with linens and bottles and the soft breathing of the twins. But every whisper felt like a pebble dropped into the quiet pool of her mind, rippling outward toward one impossible thought. He'd come to the nursery. She shouldn't have sung. She shouldn't have looked at him. She shouldn't still feel the echo of that impossible moment, the air trembling, her heart tripping like it had heard his name in its own rhythm. By afternoon, the castle had become a cage of noise. The High Council convened in the upper chambers. Banners were drawn down, the ceremonial musicians dismissed. And every servant knew that when the Alpha King left his own mating ceremony unfinished, something had shifted in the balance of the realm. Mira moved quietly through it all, invisible as smoke. That was her gift, after all. She'd perfected the art of not being seen. But fate, it seemed, had forgotten to cooperate. Night fell. The nursery glowed with soft firelight again. The twins had drifted asleep, tiny fingers curled like flower petals against their blankets. Mira sat in the rocking chair, mending one of their old toys, an old bear with one button eye. Her fingers moved mechanically, but her thoughts wandered like restless ghosts. The king's words replayed in her mind. Your scent shouldn't do that. Wake the beast. What had he meant? She'd heard stories of bond heat, of the way an alpha could sense their fated mate through the faintest trace of scent, through the pull of energy in the air. But those were myths meant for others, not her. Not a servant, not a cursed bloodline. A sharp knock broke her thoughts. Mira jumped, setting the bear aside. Come in. The door opened, revealing a figure draped in moon-silver silk. Lady Selene, the former betrothed of the king. Her beauty was almost unnatural, white blonde hair cascading in perfect waves, eyes the color of polished steel. Every movement she made was deliberate, measured, practiced for an audience that wasn't there. Mira, she said, tasting the name like a word she already disapproved of. The pups are sleeping, I assume? Yes, my lady, Mira replied softly. Selene glided into the room, her perfume sharp with jasmine and ice. She stopped by one of the cribs, looking down at the sleeping twins with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Such precious heirs, she murmured. You tend them well. Mira bowed her head. It is my duty. Celine turned then, her gaze landing squarely on Mira. I heard something curious last night, she said. A song. Mira's heart stilled. A song.
Yes.
From the nursery. Her lips curved into something almost like amusement. The guards said the Alpha himself entered this room. That he listened. Mira swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. Celine lifted a hand. No need to explain. But you must understand, child, there are certain songs that should never be sung in this castle. Her words were soft, but they cut deep. Do you know, Celine continued, circling slowly, that once, long ago, there was a melody said to awaken the soul of an Alpha? That those who carried cursed blood, gray blood, they called it, could stir the wolf itself with sound. Mira's fingers curled against her skirt. Celine smiled faintly. They say the last woman who sang it burned an entire pack alive when the Alpha she touched lost control. The air thickened between them. The fire crackled. Somewhere behind Celine's words was the cold thrill of warning. I would be careful, she said finally, her tone sweet as poisoned honey. You have a lovely voice. I'd hate for it to be silenced. She drifted toward the door, pausing in the threshold. Oh, and Mira? Yes, my lady. The king doesn't forget what disturbs his peace. Best not to give him reason to remember. Then she was gone. Mira stood motionless for a long time, the silence in her chest roaring louder than any sound. When she finally turned toward the window, the moon was high and full again, almost watching her. Its light spilled across the floor, bright as truth. Something deep inside her shifted, a small, deliberate rebellion. She hummed the song again, softer this time, under her breath, like a secret she refused to bury. And as she did, a wind stirred through the room though every window was closed. The twins didn't wake, but the air shimmered faintly, almost pulsing in time with her voice. The fire dimmed, shadows bent. Then she felt it, a tremor, faint but certain, the echo of another heartbeat resonating with her own. Not from within the room, from somewhere deeper in the castle. From him. Far above the nursery, in the royal wing, Darius Vane woke from restless half-sleep. His breath came ragged, his pulse erratic. His wolf, long dormant, paced beneath his skin like something newly awakened. He could hear it faint, melodic, impossible. That song. The same one that had wrapped around his mind the night before like silk and flame. He sat up abruptly, his claws half extended, his senses roaring. Who are you? He whispered into the dark. And somewhere below, the answer lingered on the last note of her song, a whisper carried by moonlight, old as the blood that bound them. Dawn crawled across the citadel like a reluctant confession. The great halls still reeked of smoke and spilt wine, the remnants of a ceremony that never ended. Because the Alpha King had walked away before the final vow. Now the air in Moon's Spire felt different.
Tense.
Unbalanced. As if the castle itself was waiting for something to snap. And in the king's chambers, Darius Vane was already wide awake. He stood by the open window, bare-chested, sweat glistening against skin inked with old scars and a sigil carved by magic just above his heart, the mark of the Alpha bond. Once, that mark had glowed gold whenever his mate had been near. Now it was dull. Empty. It had been that way since the Northern War, since he'd lost her. He told himself he'd moved on, that the bond's death had only taken his heart, not his will. But last night, something had shifted. The mark had throbbed, for the first time in years. And all because of a song. A servant's song. He didn't understand it.
Didn't want to.
But his wolf, the part of him that slept through years of duty and numbness, had lifted its head, restless and snarling. He gripped the windowsill until it cracked under his hand. He could still smell her, that strange scent of lavender and moonbloom that made his pulse trip. He'd bathed, changed, drowned himself in cold air, and still it clung to him like memory. He closed his eyes. The wolf inside him rumbled. Find her. Meanwhile, In the nursery below, Mira knelt beside a wooden chest, sorting through the day's clean linens. Her hands moved on instinct. Her mind did not. Sleep hadn't come easily. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw him. The way his gaze had burned through her, sharp as hunger. The way the air had crackled between them like lightning waiting for the sky to break. And under it all, that ache in her chest she couldn't name. A knock came at the door. She jumped, clutching a folded sheet. "Enter," she called, trying to keep her voice even. A guard stepped in, a young man with short-cropped hair and the weary look of someone who'd spent the night standing outside royal chambers. He bowed slightly. "His Majesty requests your presence." Mira froze. "Me?" The guard hesitated.
Yes.
"You are to come at once." She swallowed. The nursery felt suddenly too small. "Are the pups?" "They'll be watched," the king insisted. She nodded, setting the linens aside, and followed. The royal wing was hushed. Guards lined the corridor, each straight-backed and silent as stone. As she passed, some averted their eyes. Others didn't bother. She could feel their judgment, like a physical thing. When the guard opened the king's chamber doors, Mira hesitated on the threshold. The room was dim, heavy with the scent of pine smoke and steel. Sunlight filtered through tall, arched windows, painting gold across the floor. Darius stood near the hearth, his back to her, broad shoulders tense beneath a dark tunic. "You sent for me, Your Majesty?" He turned slowly. His eyes caught the light, amber and shadow, flickering with something primal. "Close the door." She obeyed, the latch clicking shut behind her. Her heart beat so hard it hurt. Darius stepped closer, each movement measured, deliberate. "Tell me about that song," he said quietly. She clasped her hands together. "It's just an old lullaby, my lord." "No," his tone sharpened. "It's not. I've heard that melody once before, years ago. It was sung in the Greyblood Sanctum, before it burned." Her breath hitched. He studied her face. "You know that name?" My mother was born there," Mira admitted, her voice trembling. "She never spoke of it. Only said we should forget." His jaw clenched. The Greybloods betrayed this realm. They used their voices to stir forbidden magic, to break bonds. "That's not true," she said before she could stop herself. Darius's gaze snapped up. "Dangerous. Careful." But Myra's voice didn't falter now, not completely. "My mother said the songs were meant to heal bonds. That before the war, alphas and singers worked together to strengthen the pack." He stared at her for a long, unreadable moment. The fire popped between them. "If that were true," he said softly, "then why did every alpha who heard that song lose control?" Mira had no answer. Only her mother's warning echoing in her mind. Never sing where an alpha can hear. The silence stretched until he turned away, running a hand over his jaw. "When you sang, something woke in me. My wolf, it hasn't stirred since." He trailed off. She waited. "Since what?" "Since my bond died." His tone was raw now, stripped of its royal distance. "The mark over my heart went cold. I thought I'd buried that part of me forever." He faced her again, eyes dark and searching. "And then you sang and suddenly," he broke off, fists clenching. "Do you understand what that means?" Myra's voice came out small. "No, my lord." "It means," he said, stepping closer, "that either you've cursed me or fate has made a mistake." Her breath trembled. He was close enough now that she could see the faint pulse in his throat, the silver flecks in his irises that only appeared when his wolf stirred. "Which do you believe?" she whispered. His voice was almost a growl. "I don't know yet." For a heartbeat, the air between them thickened again, the same electric pull that had flared in the nursery. The mark at his chest glowed faintly through his shirt, pulsing in rhythm with her own racing heart. Then, abruptly, he stepped back. "You will not sing again," he said. "Not in this castle. Not while I draw breath." "Yes, my king," she murmured, though her voice broke around the words. He turned toward the window, his silhouette framed in morning light. "You may go." She bowed quickly and left, her pulse still thrumming. But as she reached the hallway, she pressed a hand to her chest, to the spot where her own heartbeat had matched his. And for a fleeting moment, she felt something warm there, a faint, golden hum beneath her skin. Far behind her, Darius stood unmoving. His hand hovered over the mark above his heart, now faintly alight. And though he would never admit it aloud, a thought whispered through his mind like a prayer he didn't dare speak. She isn't a curse. She's the bond one thought I'd lost.
The moon rose red that night.
From the tallest tower to the outer gates, the citadel of Moonspire seemed to hold its breath. The guards at their posts spoke little, their hands tight on their weapons. In the city below, fires flickered in hearths, and prayers whispered through the alleys. For weeks the Alpha King had been the image of composure, stern, cold, predictable. Tonight, the balance cracked. Inside his private chambers, Darius Vane paced like a caged beast. The air was thick with his scent, storm and pine, edged with something wilder. He had dismissed his attendants, barred the door, and drawn the curtains. Still, he could feel her presence through the stone floors beneath him. Her song had stopped, but its echo lived under his skin. He pressed his hands against the window frame, fighting the tremor that rolled through him. His wolf stirred again, pacing in circles in the hollow space of his mind. It had been silent for years, a shadow curled in sleep. Now it breathed, growling softly, demanding what he couldn't give. Not her, he muttered. She's forbidden. The wolf didn't listen. When he closed his eyes, he saw her, Mira in the firelight, her lips parting around the lullaby, her gaze soft and fearless. The scent of lavender and milk. The tremor in her voice that shouldn't have mattered, and yet somehow reached him in the marrow of his bones. He struck the wall with his fist, hard enough to make the wood groan. The mark over his heart blazed hot, pulsing in rhythm with an unseen call. In the nursery below, Mira felt it too. She had been sitting in the quiet, brushing the pup's hair, when the temperature in the room dropped. The flames in the hearth fluttered, as if in a wind that wasn't there. The twins whimpered in their sleep. Mira stood quickly, her pulse racing. She didn't need to look to know whose energy pulsed through the walls. Something ancient, feral, and bound to him. Her mother's words came back in a rush. When an alpha's bond reawakens, the beast will claw its way free. The one who stirred it must guide it, or be devoured. Guide it, she whispered to the empty room.
How?
The windows shuddered. Somewhere above, a howl split the air low, drawn out, too raw to be ceremonial. The pups woke crying. Mira ran to them, scooping them up, whispering the only thing she knew that could soothe.
The song.
Her voice trembled at first, but as she sang, the vibrations in the air softened. The fire steadied. The pup stopped crying and pressed against her chest. She exhaled shakily. Please let that be enough. It wasn't. Moments later, the door burst open. A guard stumbled in, face pale, eyes wide. The king. He shifted. Mira froze. What? The Alpha's wolf is loose, he said. The council's calling everyone to the lower halls. You must get the heirs to safety. Before she could reply, another voice filled the corridor behind him, low, feral, and laced with power. Leave. The guard's face drained of color. He bowed once, trembling, and fled. Mira turned slowly toward the doorway. The figure that filled it wasn't fully man. Darius's eyes glowed gold in the dim light, his breath harsh and ragged. Claws had torn through his fingertips, his shoulders shook with the effort to stay upright. The wolf's form rippled beneath his skin, breaking through in flashes of silver and sinew. Mira, he ground out. Don't. But she'd already taken a step forward, instinct overriding sense. You shouldn't be here. His voice came out as a growl. You sang. Her heart leapt. The pups were frightened. You sang, he repeated, his pupils slitting. The mark on his chest glowed through the thin fabric of his shirt, burning like a star. You called to me. Mira backed away, clutching the children close. I didn't mean. He stumbled forward, one hand gripping the doorframe as if to keep himself from lunging.
You don't understand.
When you sing, I can feel it. Every note pulls me closer. It's not natural. His voice cracked on the last word, half human, half animal. Mira swallowed her fear and set the pups gently back in their crib. She straightened, her hands trembling but her gaze steady. Then let me help you control it. He stared at her, chest heaving. You can't. I can try. The wolf's snarl reverberated in the air. You'll regret it. Maybe, she said softly. But if I don't, you'll destroy this place. He hesitated. The wolf's rage flickered behind his eyes, but her words rooted him for an instant, long enough for her to step closer. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Listen to me, Your Majesty. Breathe. She lifted her hand slowly, touching her palm to his chest where the mark blazed. The heat beneath her fingers was unbearable. His body trembled, muscles taut, veins lit with gold. Then she began to hum. No words this time, only sound low and steady, the pulse of the old song without its curse. At first, it seemed futile. The wolf pushed against his skin, claws scraping, breath rasping. Then, like a rope drawn tight, something inside him gave way, not in surrender, but in recognition. The air thickened. His breathing slowed. The glow dimmed. When his head dropped forward, the shadow of his wolf receded. His claws retracted. For the first time in hours, his voice returned, rough but human. What are you doing to me? He whispered. Myra's hand trembled where it rested on his chest. I don't know. Maybe what my mother used to do for others. Maybe I'm undoing what's broken. Darius took her wrist gently, holding it against his heart. His skin was still burning, but his eyes were no longer wild. She said it was forbidden, he murmured. To touch me, to use that power. Myra's throat tightened. Then, why does it feel right? He didn't answer. For a long time, there was only the sound of their breathing and the crackle of the fire. At last he stepped back, releasing her. The council must not know of this, he said quietly. They would kill you before they asked why. She nodded, shaken. He turned toward the door, the alpha composure settling over him like armor once more. If I lose control again, you come. Only you. Then he was gone, leaving the room heavy with the scent of smoke and something newly born between them. When the door closed, Mira pressed a hand to her chest. The mark beneath his shirt had branded its rhythm into her palm, and beneath her skin, her own pulse answered in time. She whispered into the empty room, her voice barely a breath. I think I've broken more than one bond tonight. By morning, the castle had changed. What had once been murmured in corners now rippled through every hall. Servants whispered of shattered furniture, of the alpha's roar echoing through the upper chambers. The guards told each other in low voices that the king had shifted, alone, unprovoked, and without the moon's call. The council gathered before dawn. Every noble house sent a representative. Their wolves filled the high chamber with unease. From behind closed doors came the muffled thunder of argument, words like unstable, unfit, cursed blood. Mira moved quietly among them all, head bowed, hands folded, pretending not to hear. The nursery had been declared a restricted area. The twins slept under guard now, and even her key to their door had been taken. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached, folded linen until her fingers bled, and tried to disappear into the castle's heartbeat. But whispers have a way of finding the ones they hunt. She was with him that night. The song came from the nursery. The king's scent changed after that girl entered his chambers. By noon, eyes followed her wherever she went. In the council chamber above, Darius sat at the head of a long oak table, his jaw tight, his patience thinner than the light seeping through the narrow windows. Elder Corvin spoke first, a thin man with eyes like flint. Your Majesty, the incident cannot be ignored. Your loss of control was witnessed by half the royal guard. Darius's voice was low. I have already explained. You have explained nothing, Corvin snapped. We saw the damage. We heard the howls. The beast you've kept caged since the war is stirring again. And this time, it might not stop. Darius's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. I am still your alpha. Then act like one. Another elder muttered. The pack needs stability. If your bond is broken beyond repair. I said enough. His voice struck the table like a hammer. The room fell silent. Corvin leaned back slowly. Very well. But if this awakening continues, we will be forced to intervene. For the safety of the pack. They filed out one by one, leaving the air heavy with unspoken threat. When the door closed, Darius exhaled through his teeth. His control was fraying, not just because of the wolf inside him, but because every instinct he possessed screamed to go to her. To see her. To know she was safe. That evening, Mira stood in the laundry courtyard, hanging sheets that snapped in the wind like white banners. The light was fading, and the smell of rain rode in from the northern hills. A shadow fell across the linen line. The council wants to speak with you, a voice said. She turned. A guard she didn't recognize stood there, tall, expressionless, the crest of the elders stitched to his cloak. Her stomach dropped. Why? He didn't answer. She followed him through a maze of corridors she'd never walked before, past tapestries older than the kingdom itself. The council chamber loomed ahead, its doors carved with runes that glowed faintly under torchlight. Inside, the air smelled of old incense and judgment. Elder Corvin sat in the center, fingers steepled. Mira of the Grey bloodline, he said, tasting the name like rust. Do you know why you're here? No, my lord. He tilted his head. We have questions about the Alphas episode. You were present in the nursery when it began, were you not? Yes. And did you sing? She hesitated. The silence stretched. I did. For the children. Corvin smiled thinly. How loyal of you. Tell me, child, did anyone ever mention what your mother was accused of? The question hit like a blow. Mira forced herself to meet his gaze. She was accused of singing the wrong song. And you? I only sing to soothe. Corvin stood, slow and deliberate. Lies, he said softly. There is power in your voice. We can feel it even now. Another elder whispered a phrase in the old tongue, and a faint shimmer passed through the air, an enchantment to catch deceit. Myra's breath caught as the sigil on her wrist flared faintly in answer. Corvin's eyes gleamed. There it is. The blood never forgets. He turned toward the others. The grey blood curse has awakened in her. It explains everything. The king's instability, the wolf's return. This is dangerous magic. No, she said, voice trembling. I never meant. Intent is irrelevant, he cut in. You will be confined until we determine how deep the corruption runs. 2 guards stepped forward. Please, Mira pleaded. At least let me see the children. Corvin raised a hand. You'll see no one until the king approves your fate. The guards seized her arms. She struggled once, then stopped, knowing resistance would only feed their story. In the corridor outside, Darius was waiting. The guards froze when they saw him. The air shifted. The scent of dominance filled the hall, sharp as iron. Release her, he said quietly. Corvin appeared behind him, expression smug. Your Majesty, this matter concerns the safety of the realm. Darius didn't look at him. His eyes were on Mira, wide and frightened, but still unbroken. Release her, he repeated. Corvin's smile didn't waver. If she is what we suspect, you endanger us all by protecting her. Darius stepped closer until the elder flinched. I endanger more by letting you decide what's worth protecting. For a moment, no one breathed. Then he took Myra's arm himself, pulling her gently to his side. She stays under my watch. Any who object can try explaining it to my wolf. The hall emptied fast. When they were alone, he turned to her. I told you not to sing. Her voice shook. They would have taken the twins if I hadn't. He stared at her, then sighed, the anger giving way to something heavier. You saved them, and you've made yourself their target. I know. He studied her a moment longer, then said quietly, You'll stay near me until I find a way to end this. Her heart stuttered. That won't help your rumors. He almost smiled, weary and sharp. Let them talk. At least they'll be too busy whispering to notice what I'm planning next. That night, thunder rolled over Moonspire. Mira sat by the window of a chamber she had no right to occupy, the king's own, and listened to the storm. Below, lightning traced the mountains, and every flash lit his silhouette by the fire, shoulders tense, eyes distant. He hadn't told her what the council feared most, but she could feel it in the way he kept glancing toward her, as if expecting her to vanish. Because now the fate of the pack, the throne, and the beast that lived inside him were bound to one impossible truth. The song that cursed him might be the only thing keeping him human. The storm never really passed. It simply moved inward. By the next morning, the castle's corridors were slick with the smell of rain and tension. Soldiers spoke in clipped tones. The council's messengers came and went like carrion birds. Somewhere deep in the stonework, the howl of the wind sounded too much like wolves in pain. Mira woke in a room far larger than any she'd ever known. The king's chamber was quiet except for the faint hiss of the hearth and the soft rhythm of another presence. Darius sat near the window, armor half-fastened, eyes on the horizon. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I shouldn't be many things," he replied without turning. "But here we are." He looked exhausted, but the wildness from the night before had retreated to a low simmer beneath his skin. The air between them felt charged but fragile, like glass over flame. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we survive the council." The council didn't come with torches and shouts. They came with parchment and ritual. By midday, a proclamation was posted on every gate. The king would submit to a trial of balance. In the old law, it was a test of control. An alpha must summon his wolf and prove mastery before witnesses. Failure meant abdication or death. Mira read the words twice before she dared to speak. "They'll make you shift. They'll provoke it. That's the point." He strapped the last plate of armor across his chest. "They think the beast owns me." Her throat tightened. "If they see what really happens when you lose control." He crossed to her in 2 strides, fingers brushing her chin just long enough to stop the spiral of fear. "Then you do what you did before. You sing. They'll know." "They already suspect," he said. "But if I fall, this kingdom falls with me. Let them whisper what they will." That night the courtyard filled with every noble in the northern realm. Torches lined the walls. The scent of magic and wet stone thickened the air. Darius stepped into the ring of light, bare-armed, the mark over his heart faintly aglow. The council stood above, robed and watchful. Corvin's voice cut through the rain. "We call upon the Alpha King to summon the beast within and prove that it bends to his will." Darius closed his eyes. The wolf rose at once, eager, furious. His skin shimmered with heat. Claws began to form. The ground trembled. Mira stood at the edge of the crowd, every muscle taut. She could feel the shift like a storm pressing against her ribs. The bond between them pulsed, a heartbeat for 2. Then she saw it, the tremor of pain crossing his face, the flare of gold flooding his eyes. He was losing it. Before she could think, she stepped forward. "My lord." Every head turned. She pushed through the guards, rain plastering her hair to her face, and reached the center of the ring. "Let me help him." Corvin's voice rose above the murmur. "Remove her." But Darius's roar silenced them all. "Touch her, and I'll tear your throats out." The guards froze. Mira placed a hand on his chest, feeling the violent thrum beneath. "Breathe," she whispered. He trembled, half-shifted, fangs catching the torchlight. "Mira," she didn't wait. The melody rose from her throat unbidden, low and haunting, the same rhythm that had once soothed crying pups and raging kings alike. The sound wrapped around them, vibrating through the air like a living thread. The storm eased. The glow on his chest steadied. The wolf's snarl faded into a growl, then into silence. When Darius opened his eyes again, they were his own, human, amber, steady. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. Myra's knees buckled, and he caught her before she fell. "She is magic," someone shouted. "She's binding him. It's witchcraft." Darius straightened slowly, Mira still in his arms, his gaze sweeping over them all. "No," he said, voice carrying like thunder. "It's balance." Corvin stepped forward, face pale. "You've condemned us all, Your Majesty." A gray-blood bond. The king's glare stopped him cold. "Say that name again," he said softly, "and you'll find out how little control I truly have left." No one spoke. He turned then, lifting Mira easily, ignoring the hiss of scandal behind him. This trial is over. Later, when the torches had burned low and the council had retreated to their chambers to plot in whispers, Mira sat by the fire, while Darius poured wine into 2 cups. "They'll come for you," she said. "They already have." He handed her a cup. "Now they'll think twice." She looked up at him, searching his face. "You defied them for me." He took a slow drink. "I defied them because they were wrong." For a moment, silence. The firelight danced across his features, softening the edges. Then he said quietly, "There's something you should know. When you sang tonight, I saw her."
Who?
"My first bond," he said. She was smiling. "She told me to let go." Myra's eyes stung. "Then maybe that's what we're doing." He set his cup aside and reached for her hand, the calloused warmth of his palm grounding her. "Whatever this is, it's no curse," he said. "But the council won't stop until they make it one." Outside, thunder rolled again, distant now, as if the storm itself were moving on to other wars. Inside, for the first time, Darius allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow, we plan how to keep you alive." The next dawn came quiet and gray, a deceptive calm after the storm. From the courtyard below came the clatter of armor and the whisper of rumors carried on the damp wind. The citadel of Moonspire had survived another night, but only just. Mira lay awake in the king's chamber, staring at the ceiling carved with old runes. The previous evening replayed in her mind like a dream she wasn't sure had really happened. The torches, the circle, his pulse beating beneath her hand, the song that had turned fury into calm. "You saved him," something inside her whispered. "Or you cursed him further." She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her throat ached from singing, her whole body heavy with the strange energy the melody had drawn from her. At the window, the sky was pale and washed out. The king was already gone. He had left before sunrise to meet the council again, to face whatever new laws they would forge in the wake of his defiance. She rose, dressed, and found herself pacing the length of the room. In the hearthlight, she caught sight of a small wooden box resting on the table. It hadn't been there the night before. Inside lay a folded scrap of parchment, its edges brittle with age. The handwriting was her mother's. "If you are reading this, my daughter, then the song has found you." Myra's breath caught. She sank into the nearest chair, eyes tracing the looping script. "Our voices were never meant for war. The first song was a gift to the Alphas. An echo of the moon's pulse, meant to join wolf and human in harmony. But when the elders grew fearful, they called it witchcraft and turned our gift into a curse. If the Alpha's wolf stirs at your voice, it means his bond is fractured, not lost. The melody does not enslave, it mends. It will bind you both if you let it. But be warned, child, healing comes at a price. One voice will always have to fall silent so the other can endure." The last line blurred through the tears she hadn't realized were falling. She closed the box, heart pounding. Hours later, the king returned. He looked worn, his eyes shadowed, the faintest trace of blood on the edge of his sleeve. The wolf within him still pulsed beneath his skin, restless, but quiet for now. "The council accepted your explanation?" she asked. He gave a humorless laugh. "They accepted that they can't kill me without losing everything that keeps them safe." He glanced toward her, eyes softening. "But they want you gone. They'll call it exile to hide what it really is." Her fingers tightened around the box in her lap. "And you?" "I told them no." He dropped into the chair across from her, the weight of the crownless ruler heavy in every line of his posture. "But it won't hold. Sooner or later, they'll force my hand." She hesitated, then offered him the parchment. My mother left this. She knew what the song was. He read silently, his expression darkening. So it's true, he murmured. It was never a weapon.
No.
It was meant to heal. He set the parchment down carefully. And the cost. Her voice barely carried. One of us will have to lose our voice. Forever. He met her gaze across the table. The silence stretched until it hummed. Then I won't let you sing again.
It doesn't work like that, she said.
The bond's already forming. The song was only the beginning. Something in his eyes shifted. Fear, awe, maybe both. If this binds you to me, it puts you in more danger than you can imagine. I already am, she whispered. We both are. He leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. The elders will never accept it. They'll come for you again, and this time they won't bring parchment. Then let me learn how to use it, she said suddenly. If this gift can save you, it can save the pack. There must be more to it, other verses, other songs. Darius's gaze met hers. Where would you even look? She opened the box again, showing him the faint sigil etched inside the lid, a crescent entwined with a single feather. My mother left this mark in all her letters, the same one carved on the ruins of the old Greyblood chapel.
His eyes narrowed.
That place was sealed after the war. Anyone caught there is executed. Then we'll have to go at night. He exhaled sharply, torn between fury and reluctant admiration. You're either brave or reckless. Maybe both, she said, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. At dusk, we ride. I'll take you myself. That evening, Mira stood beside the king at the stables, the scent of rain and horsehair heavy in the air. Above them, the clouds were splitting, the first sliver of moonlight cutting through. You don't have to do this, he said. I think I do. He reached out, his hand closing around hers, the touch grounding her more than words ever could. Then whatever we find there, we face it together. Their eyes held for a heartbeat that seemed to stretch beyond time, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. The wind rose, carrying the faintest echo of a melody only she could hear. The hidden song was calling them home. The path to the northern cliffs wound through a forest that still carried the scars of old fire. Trees stood blackened and hollow, their bark split where lightning had struck generations ago. Darius rode ahead, silent but alert, his scent sharp in the cold air. Mira followed close behind, the hood of her cloak pulled low, the wooden box hidden under her arm. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the moon was a white shard above them. Beyond the last trees, the ruins rose from the rock like bones, the old Greyblood chapel, half-collapsed and covered in creeping ivy. Where there should have been doors, only empty arches yawned, wind sighing through them like breath through a flute. Mira dismounted first. The air here felt different, heavy, humming. Do you feel that? She whispered. Darius nodded. Old power. It shouldn't still be alive. They stepped inside. The chapel smelled of damp stone and memory. Shattered pews lay scattered across the floor. Shards of colored glass glittered like fallen stars. At the far end, a cracked altar stood beneath a mural so faded it looked like smoke. Mira brushed away the dust and revealed a symbol carved into the stone, the same crescent and feather sigil from her mother's box. This was ours, she murmured. The singer's crest. Darius knelt beside her, tracing the lines with one scarred finger. What did they sing here? I think this is where the first alpha bond was forged, she said, her voice barely a breath. When wolves and humans lived as one. He gave a short, rough laugh. Hard to imagine. Not impossible, she answered. Only forgotten. They explored in silence until Mira found a narrow stair spiraling down beneath the altar. Faint light shimmered below, flickering like candle flame. She glanced at Darius. He motioned for her to stay behind him and descended first, every step slow, measured. The stairs opened into a small chamber. In its center lay a pool no wider than a table, its water clear and still despite the centuries. Runes glowed faintly on the walls, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Darius spoke softly. Moonlight's blessing pool. They said the singers drew power here. Mira knelt at the edge. The reflection staring back wasn't just hers. It shimmered, layered with another face she didn't recognize, a woman crowned in silver, her eyes full of sorrow. "Mother," she whispered. The image smiled sadly and dissolved into ripples. When the water stilled again, new words were carved into the stone at her knees, letters forming as if the pool itself was writing them. The final verse binds what war divided. Sing only in truth, or silence will claim you both. Darius crouched beside her. What does it mean? She swallowed hard. It means there's another song, one meant to seal the bond completely. And the price. Her eyes met his. If it's sung with fear or deceit, one life ends to preserve the other. The silence that followed felt alive. The drip of water echoed through the chamber. Darius rose first, the decision already written in his expression. Then we don't use it, he said. Not unless there's no other choice. Mira hesitated. The council will never stop hunting us. If they destroy you, the pack fractures. If they destroy me, you lose control. This song might be the only way to end the war they started. He turned to her, anger flashing, not at her, but at fate itself. You're asking me to risk your life for mine. I'm offering it, she said quietly. That's different. The wolf flickered behind his eyes, pain and devotion tangled together. He reached for her then, fingers brushing her cheek, and the air between them seemed to ignite. I swore I would never let another bond chain me, he murmured. But God's help me, I can't breathe when you're not near. Myra's pulse raced. Then maybe the bond isn't a chain. Maybe it's the key. Before he could answer, the ground above them shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The pool rippled violently. Voices shouted in the distance, metal striking stone. Darius's head snapped up. They've followed us.
How?
He bared his teeth. Corvin must have set a tracker. Move. They raced up the stairs. Through the broken arches, torches glowed in the trees. Dozens of them. The council's hunters fanned out, weapons drawn. At their head rode Elder Corvin, his cloak gleaming like oil in the moonlight. Mira of the Grey Bloodline, he called. By order of the High Council, you are condemned for sorcery against the crown. Darius stepped in front of her, drawing the long blade at his hip. You'll have to get through me first. Corvin's smile was almost kind. You've already chosen your doom, Majesty. Do you think one curse song can save you now? Lightning cracked overhead. Mira felt the power rising in her chest again, the melody thrumming under her skin like heartbeat and thunder combined. She looked at Darius, at the circle of blades closing in around them, and whispered, Maybe it can. He shook his head once. Not here. But the choice was already made. She opened her mouth and began to sing. The moment Myra's voice rose, the battlefield stilled. It wasn't a loud song. It didn't need to be. The melody came like wind before rain. Soft, steady, carrying weight older than language. The air shimmered around her, silver threads spiraling outward from where she stood. Darius froze mid-step, every instinct warring between fight and surrender. The glow from his chest mark brightened until it outshone the torches. The hunters hesitated. Blades faltered. Even Corvin's horse reared, eyes rolling in panic. What's sorcery? He began, but the words vanished in the hum that followed. The power unfurled from Mira like light breaking through storm clouds. The song was not wrath, it was truth itself, sung aloud. In its rhythm came memories, the first wolves kneeling beside the first singers, the vow they had once made, to guard, not rule, to bind, not break. Every rune on the ruins' walls ignited. The moon above blazed white. Darius fell to one knee, gripping the ground as his wolf surged forward, but this time, it didn't tear free. It merged. Flesh and spirit, beast and man, meeting in balance. His roar shook the stones, but it was a roar of release, not rage. Myra's voice wavered. She felt the pull, the cost her mother had warned of, one life dimming so the other could shine. She looked at him, saw the pain in his eyes, and knew what the song was asking. She changed the melody. Instead of surrender, she wove into it the sound of mercy, the note of sharing. The runes flickered uncertainly, as if the old laws couldn't decide what to do with defiance. Then the magic burst outward in a single shockwave of light. When it faded, the night was silent again. The torches had gone out. The hunters lay stunned but unharmed. Corvin's cloak smoldered at the edges. Darius stood, steady, his eyes bright gold-ringed with human amber. The mark on his chest glowed faintly before settling into a calm pulse. Mira swayed on her feet. He caught her before she fell. "You changed the song," he said. "I couldn't let it take either of us." He looked around them. The ruins still glowed softly, the old symbols rewriting themselves into new patterns. "Then you did something no Greyblood ever tried," he said quietly. "You rewrote the curse." Behind them, Corvin pushed himself to his knees. "What have you done?" Darius's gaze cut toward him. "Restored what you destroyed." He turned his eyes to the crowd of soldiers. "Tell your council, the Alpha line and the Greybloods are one again. The bond stands." No one moved. No one challenged. The wind swept through the arches, scattering ash and petals together. Later, when the fires had died and the wounded had gone, they stood alone before the chapel. Mira watched the first hint of dawn light the horizon. Her voice was hoarse. "The song is finished now." Darius shook his head.
"No.
"It's changed. Like us." He turned to her. The gold in his eyes softened to amber. "You once said maybe the bond wasn't a chain. Maybe it's the key. I think you were right." They stood in the quiet that followed. No more prophecy. No more threat. Just two souls breathing in the same rhythm. Below them, the forest began to stir with the first morning sounds. The kingdom would wake soon to a world that had shifted while it slept. For now, they let the silence hold them. Dawn rose slowly over the shattered valley, spilling pale gold over the ruins. Mist clung to the ground, veiling the scars of the night before. Where the hunters' camp had stood, there was only silence, broken by the whisper of wind through broken stone. Mira stood at the edge of the field with her cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. The once warm air carried the faint scent of charred wood and wet earth. In the distance, she could see the faint shimmer of the ancient runes still burning along the cliffside, remnants of the song that had remade them both. Darius approached from behind, his footsteps soft despite his size. He was no longer dressed as a king. The ceremonial armor was gone, replaced by a simple tunic, torn and blood-stained. He looked younger like this, unburdened. Yet there was still an undeniable weight in his gaze, the awareness of what they had survived and what they had changed. "The council will come soon," he said quietly. "They'll want answers. They'll want to know what we've done." Mira didn't look at him. "We didn't destroy anything, Darius. We gave them back the truth they buried." He stepped beside her, his presence steady and grounding. "Truth has a cost. They'll call it treason. Then let them." Her voice held no tremor. "Let them see what they made of their lies." He studied her profile, the way the early light caught on her silver-streaked hair. "You're not afraid." "I used to be," she admitted. "Every day."
Of them. Of you.
"Of what I might become if I stopped hiding." She turned to face him. "But I learned something last night. Fear doesn't vanish. It becomes a compass. It points to what matters most." The word struck him with the weight of prophecy. "Then what does your fear point to now?" "To you," she said, her eyes steady. "To the kingdom. To what we might build from what's left." They walked together through the ruins, where the first survivors of the night's chaos were stirring. Wolves in human form moved among the stones, gathering weapons, helping the wounded. When they saw Darius and Mira, they hesitated, not with hostility, but with the fragile, tentative awe of those witnessing something they did not yet understand. An old gray-furred sentinel stepped forward, his face lined with scars that had seen too many winters. He bowed his head deeply, not out of submission, but recognition. "The Song of the Moon has returned," he said, his voice rough. We felt it in our bones. The curse has lifted. A murmur spread through the others. Eyes that once held suspicion now shimmered with something closer to reverence. Mira felt the weight of their gazes, the sudden shift of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. "I'm no savior," she began, but the old wolf shook his head. "Not savior. Balance." The words sank deep into her heart. Balance. That was what the world had lost, and what the song had restored. By midday, they reached the gates of Silverhollow Keep. The castle looked different now, its towering spires glinting with a strange silver light, as though the runes of the night before had etched themselves into the very stone. The guards at the entrance lowered their weapons when they saw the Alpha and his companion approach, confusion and curiosity flickering in their eyes. Inside, the grand hall was in disarray. The council sat gathered in half-ruined splendor, their fine robes torn, their confidence shaken. Lord Corvin rose at once, fury twisting his features. "You bring her here after what she's done?" he hissed. "The old laws forbid." "The old laws died last night," Darius interrupted, his voice cutting clean through the chaos. "And with them, the lies that poisoned our bloodlines." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some of the elders leaned forward, eyes wide with disbelief. Others recoiled as if from blasphemy. Corvin sneered. "You think your song changed the order of the gods?" Mira stepped forward, her presence luminous in the dim hall. "It didn't change the gods," she said softly. "It reminded them we still exist." The light in her eyes, soft silver, alive with power, made even the most cynical of the elders falter. Corvin tried to speak again, but his voice caught. The mark of the moon pulsed faintly on his throat, glowing in sync with hers. The truth couldn't be denied. The bond between king and singer wasn't a curse or rebellion. It was divine design. That night, the kingdom gathered under a clear sky. The moon hung low and new, a thin crescent of promise. 1,000 wolves filled the courtyard, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of pine and smoke. They had come to witness what none had seen in centuries, a rebinding of the crown and the song. Mira stood before them, her cloak whipping in the wind. Darius took his place beside her, the mark of the Alpha gleaming faintly against his skin. Together, they knelt and pressed their palms to the earth. "The moon saw us once as one," Darius began, his deep voice carrying over the crowd. "Then we forgot her voice. We hunted the singers who guided us. We called our own history treason." Myra's hand trembled slightly as she laid it over his. "But tonight," she said, "we remember. Not as rulers and servants. Not as beasts and prey. As one pack." The words rippled outward like a blessing. A low hum began in the crowd, uncertain at first, then swelling into harmony. Dozens, then hundreds of wolves joined in, their voices blending with hers in a single rising chord. Above them, the new moon flared with sudden brilliance, its silver light spilling over the gathered pack like a benediction. The air vibrated with the resonance of something ancient and pure, not power, not dominance, but unity. When the sound faded, silence returned. Heavy, holy, complete. After the ceremony, Mira and Darius stood alone on the high terrace overlooking the valley. Below them, fires glowed like fallen stars, marking the rebirth of a kingdom that would never be the same again. "You realize," Darius said quietly, "you've changed everything." Mira smiled faintly. "So did you." He turned to her. "What now?" She looked out toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn began to erase the shadows. "Now we begin again. No more songs of chains. Only songs of choice." They stood together, watching the new day rise over the silvered forest. Somewhere in the distance, the first call of a wolf echoed, clear, strong, and free. And for the first time in generations, the kingdom of Silverhollow answered not in war, but in harmony. And so, under the light of a new moon, the curse broke, not through power, but through truth. Two souls who should have destroyed each other instead rewrote their fate, together. In the ruins of the old world, they didn't just save a kingdom, they taught it how to sing again. If this story found its way into your heart, if you love worlds of dark fantasy, forbidden magic, and love that defies destiny, make sure you subscribe. Because this isn't the end. It's just the next chapter waiting to be sung.